Does somebody have news for me, either from last week that we didn't get to or to today? Who's bringing the news today? We lose today. Piece the side of this out of the way, this over here, near. Today is Fed watching assignment for today. Should be brought by, they just have Cole Ferguson. Cole, are you in the house? Anybody named Cole here? No Cole in the house. Okay. Let's see. There's the speed grader button. Let's see. There's Natasha. Probably in the line. Student. Daniel Chapman. So you're on for Wednesday.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll look forward to hearing some news about the Fed from you on Wednesday. Let me do this then. I will put my Zoom. Share. Continue. Go to this. Share. Okay. There we go. All right, so got a couple of things in the news here. The mystery of low U.S. labor participation. Okay. What's happening with labor? We see change in labor force participation rate, 15 to 64-year-olds. It dipped, but it hasn't rebounded, whereas in the Euro-Asia region and in Japan, it has rebounded. Change in employment ages 15 and older, still below. And change from quarter 4 to quarter 3, GDP is higher here. So there's, since bottoming out in early 2020, the US economy has handily outperformed other major advanced economies, except in one crucial dimension, its labor force. Of course, unemployment is still really low, or again, really low. And so what's happening here is that a lot of people have not yet returned to the labor force. Maybe that has to do with moms staying home with their kids. Maybe some people are making money but aren't reporting it. So it'll be interesting to dig in a little bit more into what's happening in the labor market. Here we have news about the Fed. Data keep the Fed's rate plan in place. So how does the Fed work? So I haven't read this, so just be sure that you're looking occasionally at the Wall Street Journal to see what's going on in the news, and we look forward to other students bringing reports from this. Okay. What's the, how do you button? This button. There we go. Okay. How about those homeworks? Take a couple of minutes to discuss with your neighbors what doing the homeworks was like, and then we'll share as a group.
It's like 3 questions. Still, I think that's Yeah. Think about it. It's just reworking the question. It's so much. Like what does help is like the video. Yeah. But like it's hard because like yeah, had a race to go and put in. I wish they had a way to at least there's a video like side by side. That would actually help a lot more. I agree. Yeah, they did this with their numbers. Let me remember what my each question has like 8 parts. Yeah.
Okay, let's go over here. Sorry, you guys. Go feedback. What do you have to say?
The reference, like you can read about it in the Learn Smart, it shows you a different like equation for a certain problem compared to the work it out. So it's kind of confusing sometimes.
Okay, so there was, do the different equations reconcile?
I mean, yeah, it's like, so on like the work it out, it'll be like 10 times easier than just straight out of the book type.
The working outs are pretty easy, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. That's just supposed to get your brain moving with the main principle. That's good. Okay, thoughts from the back?
The end of chapter questions made me scream.
Made you scream?
Yes, but that was because like there's just a few different areas where like I had the like for the increase versus decrease and all the like drop down menus, if you click on anything else, it'll wipe it out. So there was like 4 or 5 times where I like when it was like clicking back and forth in the book, and then I like went to click on a different question that had talked about something like similar in that question, and it wiped out all my answers because I hadn't submitted it as an attempt yet. So it was just like things like that, and then like question 4 that you sent an announcement about. I don't know if you saw my email.
I did. It was hard, right?
Yeah, well, because you saw my email, so you know why. But I kept doing it the way of like assuming other things would adjust, and then getting it wrong and doing tons until I got out there keeping the money base stable.
Now
I could get it, but
now the penalty for getting it wrong and trying again is really low, right? And in previous years for other courses, I've had like a really high penalty on the second try, but I'm not going to change it to that. To be honest, I hadn't worked through the problems before, right? These are just all provided by the publisher. And so, I went and worked through these problems, and we're going to go ahead and work through the problems that are due this week as well. And if anything seems absolutely ludicrous, I'll remove that question. Other thoughts about the homework in general? Let's go to this middle row here. What do you guys have to say?
It was very difficult, I thought.
Okay, so.
And it was, I would say, the 45 minutes was like how you said, like per problem set or whatever you'd want. I spent way more time than that.
Way more time than that.
Yeah.
Did anybody get to the problem set after I sent out the email recommending that you take notes and have the equations on hand with scratch paper? Did anybody get to the problem set after I sent that out? Did anybody do it? And did it help at all?
I did.
It helped.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, what I would do was I had the formulas written out, but a lot of times, because I kind of just like skim the chapters and focus more on the lectures, I had to like go back in the book and reread to make sure I was doing my math and stuff right.
Yeah, me too.
But it helped. It definitely helped, like having it written out, because then I could basically I just rewrote the formula, and when I looked at the questions, I would write the question information down and then go back to the book to reread how to do the problem again and make sure, and then do it with the numbers.
So total amount of time spent doing homework this week?
Exponentially higher.
Yeah.
Well, how much time did you spend doing homework last week? That's what I'm actually talking about.
It was not proportionate.
Not proportionate.
Not proportionate.
So 5 hours?
Yeah, I would say it probably took twice as long.
At least 3.
At least 3.
Yeah.
3 hours.
So if it's 3 hours, I'm not apologizing, I'm not on the course, right? It starts getting more than that, I start getting worried because, then don't start it'll much more adversely affect my student evaluations. I don't care. Yes,
I think it also depends on whether or not we wait until Saturday to. do
yeah, waiting
all
until
of the
Saturday is
homework
bad.
At
bad
once.
strategy.
I think that just kind of kills it,
Yeah.
if you have to do them all at once.
We had like the two of us had like a big formatting issue, especially with like on like the last question on like the end of chapter questions 4. With like the billions and millions and trying to like read the graph. That took me a really long time to like attempt to figure out. And I couldn't quite like figure out how to make it.
Yeah, I think, and I included that point in my email, right?
Yeah, but it still couldn't get it to work out. I tried and like I was like popping out like the window, but I couldn't figure out how to get the graph to like get any bigger at all.
Okay. There was a button for that, but I didn't tell you about it because I didn't know and I couldn't figure it out myself until I talked to somebody on the phone. Nick, who's Nick? Are you Nick? No. Who did I talk to on the phone? It's probably an online student. Okay, yeah, I was like, how did you get it? Well, he sent me an Instagram, like, well, somebody sent. I'm gonna remove that portion of this conversation. You had another point though.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, because talking about the last, the Fred one, I kept getting it wrong over and over again. And when I finally gave up on it, a lot of the answers were the answers I'd already put. It was just, I rounded it differently. And since the question hadn't specified that it was rounding anything, it was really frustrating.
All right, fair. I will be sure to work through the problem set and try to identify those problems ahead of time. Amongst all the other things I have to do. My fault for assignment. Okay, this week we're looking at chapters 6 and 19. We didn't talk about chapter 7 in person, but I posted a video in which I think I did a pretty decent job of explaining the concepts that are in chapter 7. The main equation that comes out of that, I'm gonna walk through pretty carefully. And the stories about unemployment relating to relationships, I think are fun. So if you haven't watched it already, I recommend that you do. This week, chapter 6 and 8, and not 6 and 20, I should say. The old edition was chapter 19. Chapter 6 is about international trade. I'm going to hold off on that for a minute. And I'm going to talk about chapter 20, which is about consumption. The idea behind chapter 20 is to think about the micro foundations. For macroeconomic analysis. Why would we need micro foundations? Weren't they always micro foundations? Well, no. Keynes' general theory was considered so revolutionary because it was not founded as closely on micro foundations. Keynes comes up with an idea for how consumption works. That roughly looks like this, right? So we've got output and planned expenditures, and we've got consumption. Now, if we talk about how much you're going to consume and your income, let's say you earn $10,000 a year, how much of that are you going to consume? Well, maybe you'll consume all $10,000 of that. So if that's the case, if people consume everything that they earn, then consumption would be basically, like a 45-degree angle on output. It would be a one-for-one relationship. However, Keynes supposes that that's not the case. Keynes supposes that consumption is more like this. And he supposes this for a couple of reasons. First of all, he supposes that people don't consume everything that they earn, that they save some. Well, how much of what you earn do you consume and how much of it do you save? Right? Of your earnings, right? You consume some percentage of it, and the difference goes to savings. So this is how much you would consume, this is how much you would save. If there is a change in your income, the percentage of the change in your income that you consume is going to be smaller than the amount that you earn, that your earnings increase. Does that make sense? Right, that the slope of this line is not equal to 1, it's less than 1. If you earn, $10,000 more than you did last year, the point is that you're not going to spend $10,000 more than you did last year. You're going to spend some share of it, and you'll save the difference. Okay, now I think I've already talked a bit about some of these things, but one of the things that bothers me from the very get-go on this is this intercept. Why might that intercept be bothersome? Yes.
It implies that at a certain dollar amount, you're not consuming anything.
At a certain level of income. If you have zero income,
Oh, you're still consuming, right?
you're still consuming. That's why it bothers me. Right? It presumes that people have a certain level of consumption even if they're not earning anything. But that's not that bothersome if they're borrowing to do it. Right? And supposedly somebody will lend you money to consume if they think that in the future you're going to be able to pay it back. We're going to get to that in a minute. Okay. Now this proportion, right, Keynes calls the marginal propensity to consume. That is our marginal propensity to consume. So an equation that would express this would be that consumption is equal to some level of fixed consumption plus some percentage of income. So you have an intercept of C, and then you've got the slope times Y, and that's how much, that's your income. The marginal propensity to consume, right, which would be dC dy, right? That's how would consumption change as output changes, right? That would be C, little c. Let's put a little hat on this here to say that that's little c. The marginal propensity to consume is little c. Why does this matter? It becomes a big deal when we try to introduce policies that affect people's behavior. So for example, if the government is trying to increase consumer demand for things, and as a result, and in order to try to achieve that, reduces taxes, such that consumers are able to keep more of their income as disposable income, then will people spend all that they are given? And if they spend less than what they're given, then the stimulus of giving people money might not be as effective as the government was supposing that it would be. Okay, so the higher the marginal propensity to consume, the more effective a stimulus that gives consumers money will be. The lower the marginal propensity to consume, the worse. Okay. The average propensity to consume would be equal to C divided by Y instead of the derivative. And in that case, in this story, right, that's equal to the fixed amount of output divided by Y plus the marginal propensity to consume. Okay. In other words, the average propensity to consume might be described as a line that is drawn from the origin to the actual consumption curve at any point. And so this slope would be the average propensity to consume. Average propensity to consume starts out very high, and it gets lower and lower and lower as income increases. Do you follow the geometry of that? Okay. So if income continues to grow, right, the average propensity to consume will reduce. Well, what's happening to the rest of the money? The rest of your income? It's going more and more to savings. Is that a bad thing? Depends upon your point of view. In the long run, more money flowing into savings means more investment in new technologies or capital that helps to augment our labor and make us more productive. However, if more people are putting more and more money into savings, and those savings develop into inventories, right? If that savings just goes into making more stuff in inventories, but consumption doesn't increase as well, or not, the consumption does not increase at the same pace, then the stockpile of inventories will grow and grow and grow until firms no longer want to build anything. And if a firm doesn't want to build anything, then it's going to lay off its workers. And we generate the conditions that might cause a recession and an increase in unemployment due to a glut of savings. Now, I'm not persuaded about that point of view, but that is sort of the framework that Keynes is working within. It comes out of Malthus, who had ideas about a general glut emerging. Okay. By the way, where is the interest rate in this equation here? Where does interest factor into our propensity to consume? In this model, it's not in there at all. Right. Remember, the interest rate is sort of what we use to think about how much money we want to save or borrow. And an increase in the interest rate will tend to increase the quantity of loanable funds that are saved. But that's not at all in this model. You might also think about the interest rate as working this way. Consume today, consume tomorrow. You might have a production possibility for you to compare consumption today and tomorrow. The frontier is how much money you earn. You have a bunch of money, you earn it. You can consume, right, the majority of your earnings. And you can save some of your earnings for later. Notice that at this point, there will be a line that is tangent to this curve. That line is the price line between consuming tomorrow and consuming today. There's another name for the price of consumption tomorrow relative to consumption today. Interest rate. Interest rate is the time price of money. So as we choose to consume more tomorrow, right, that would be consistent with an increase in the interest rate. The willingness to consume tomorrow in terms of consumption foregone today, right, means that you have a longer time horizon and a higher discount rate. Questions? Okay. This is really kind of important for thinking through all these things. You may be familiar with the model having to do with trees. So if you're going to grow a tree, when should you chop it down? If you're growing an entire field of timber trees, when will you chop them down?
As soon as they reach the right size.
Well, how do you know what the right size is?
That's what kind of product you're making.
Maybe. It might depend more on the rate of growth of trees. So if a tree increases its mass initially, right? It increases its mass initially at a rate of 10% a year, right? Then you might let the tree grow. But as the tree gets bigger, if the rate of mass of growth of the tree declines as it gets bigger and eventually falls to something like 4%, then you might choose to chop the tree down somewhere in here. How would you know? Or when would you do that? Well, you chop it down when the rate of growth is equal to the interest rate. Because if you let it keep on growing beyond that, your tree is growing slower than money. Does that make sense?
I want to scoot that down. It's for class.
Thanks. Okay. If incomes go up, but there are no good investments for people to put their money into, that will increase the general glut. As the general glut increases, aggregate demand declines, and that leads to a recession. There's a term for that. It's called the secular stagnation. Secular stagnation. And that tends to be associated with the idea of an indefinite recession, or even an indefinite depression. It will continue as long as the inventories continue. The beatings will continue until morale has improved. Now, Kuznets came along. And he claimed that the average propensity to consume is stable over the long run. If that's true, then what we might observe is we have a constant average propensity to consume, but incomes are going up, right? Then what must happen to consumption if consumption is well described by a line like this? Well, what has to happen is that consumption has to ratchet up gradually over time, such that we don't have just one consumption line from which we measure the marginal propensity to consume, but that it ratchets up over time. This seems to me a reasonable way to think about the economy. The idea is that in a low income economy, if you happen to get a little bit more income, right, you might spend some of it and save the rest. But as the overall level of wealth in your economy increases, the intercept goes up. In other words, the intercept being the minimum that you'd be willing to spend in order to survive. I can't possibly get by on less than $40,000 a year. And some people will make that claim. It's not true. I could get by, right, as could you, probably on less than $2,000 a year. It would not be fun, right? But it could be done. If I had to get by on less than $40,000 a year, $1,000 a year, I'd rather die. Someone might say dramatically, but they might also really mean it. In other words, there's a real keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing happening here. It's important to people not only that they have things to consume, but also that they maintain a certain level of status amongst their peers. And that's not really captured very well in economic models, but it's true. Right? I don't have much sympathy for it, but that's normative. I don't have much sympathy for it. I don't have much sympathy for, status. Kuznets, by the way, kind of invented GDP, or he developed the accounting methods that are used by governments today for calculating GDP. Okay. So the Keynesian approach works for household data in the short run, but not in the long run. In the long run, there's this ratcheting effect that isn't captured within Keynes's model. In other words, we took Keynes's model and applied it to the data, right? And over the long run, it doesn't hold up, but it does hold up in the short run. And Keynes was only trying to explain the short run, so that's probably okay. That model works for that. But to use his model to try to explain the long run doesn't necessarily work. So people started banging around ideas about this this consumption function. Again, this is important because it directs public policy as to how to help us get out of a recession. And if there are, if there's a relatively low marginal propensity to consume, then giving money to consumers is not going to have the desired effect on aggregate demand. So economists started looking for other ways to describe consumption. And we come to Modigliani. Who has what we call the life cycle hypothesis. Now, if you had me for intro, you've heard this all before, although you might not have heard me describe all the different names for things. Okay, that I'm giving them. The idea here is that people can engage in consumption smoothing. They do this over lifetime income. So income oftentimes varies systematically. People can predict, or at least have some rough guesses about how their incomes are going to adjust over their lifetime. So you know that right now, your income is rather low. Or you're hoping that it's low relative to what you earn when you graduate from college. Yes?
Keep that down just a little bit.
Okay. And so, but you also know that you hope to earn more someday in the future. So then the question is, at what level will you consume? I could do a survey and ask, how many packages of ramen noodle were consumed by the students in this room within the last month? Right? And then use that as some measure of your level of consumption. My guess is that relative to when I was a college student, the rate of consumption of ramen noodles is relatively lower. Okay? College students today tend to consume more or higher quality amenities than college students in the past. Not a normative statement, it's just kind of true. You're all like, okay, boomer. Look, I'm not a boomer, right? I'm a millennial. There's a difference. All right. So we have a level of consumption. What people tend to do is they tend to adopt a certain quality of life with the expectation that they're going to have a high level of income at some point in the future. If you know that you're going to be earning more someday, then you might start consuming somewhere closer to that level today. All right? So then consumption over your lifetime might be relatively smooth. Not perfectly smooth, but relatively smooth. However, your income over your lifetime is not smooth, is it? Your income changes. Right now, you're a college student. Before that, you were the charge of your parents exclusively, right? And so some of you right now are consuming at a rate higher than your income, which means that you're borrowing, or somebody else is paying for you, which is the same thing. You might not call it one, it might be a gift, but unless your parents are very, very generous, that comes with strings attached. All right, so here you are, you finish your first year of college, you finish your second year of college, you finish your third year of college, and then you graduate. What happened? How many of you are seniors? Graduating in May? Right? That's what happened. You took the most important class of your entire college career, the second semester of your senior year. This is the class that's going to earn you all that money. You should be paying me. You're paying me. No, you're not. No, what happened? You got the sheepskin, right? You got your diploma. It's odd because this is true in the data. That we see that incomes for students who do not graduate but have completed 3 years or more of college without graduating are relatively low compared to people who get that diploma. Why? Did you only study important things your second semester senior year? No. Matter of fact, we didn't learn anything useful in college. Might be true. What does it matter? That sheepskin might be what you could describe that increase is the sheepskin effect, which is it used to be that your college diplomas were actually printed or written on the skin of a sheep. Why? Because it lasted longer than paper, or the kinds of paper that existed back then. And so by receiving that diploma, your lifetime income has gone up and that your immediate income has gone up dramatically. So here you are, you're earning a higher income, you graduated college, you're in your first job, right? You're earning a decent wage, but not as much as you hope to earn over your lifetime, right? You hope to earn even more someday. I'm gonna do this in fold-out book fashion. Okay. Continue this way. Okay. So you graduate, you get your first job. What do you do for your first job? You take the job that offers you the highest pay? Not necessarily, right? You might want to take the job that is going to offer you a decent wage, but also where you're going to learn a lot. Right? You might want to take a job where you're going to develop skills that are going to be valuable on the market. After all, you're only going to be at your first job for 2 or 3 years. For most of you, right? Is that what you're expecting? I think most of you are caught up on that. All right, so you're going to take a job that isn't the highest income that you can get, but maybe one where you're learning skills. You're still developing that human capital. And then you're going to get a new job in 2 or 3 years where your income goes up substantially if you're not a jerk or an idiot, because people have realized you're not a lunch tax, you're useful and a good employee. But that takes a while for people to find out. The first job, the main thing that you're showing in your first job is that you are employable. And a lot of people, let me tell you, are not. They need to have some character adjustments. You're proving that you're employable. First of all, you're proving that you're not an idiot, that you can finish things. Then you're proving that you're employable. And then you move up in management, or you continue to increase your earning ability and potential over time. What happens to your consumption? Well, generally, it remains relatively smooth. However, it can also change, can't it? For example, you graduate, you buy a car. Okay. You get married and have a few kids. You get a divorce. Don't do that. It's really expensive. I'm luckily married to my first wife, right? My only wife, right? Not gonna have another one. Not like that guy in Afghanistan, right? 2 wives, too expensive. Don't get a divorce. It's really expensive. Avoid them at all costs. Well, not at all costs, but okay. And then you know, as the kids move out of the house, right? Then your costs go down, right? You downsize the size of your house, right? And your costs. But in general, this is much more smooth than your income path is. And many students today are choosing to consume at a level closer to what their lifetime highest level of income will be. Maybe not wise, maybe wise, I don't know. Okay. Well, as you go on, your income goes up. I read something yesterday that says you reach your most productive level in your 60s. Thank God. Most Nobel Prize winners are in their 60s. Right? Most presidents were in their 60s or 70s. Most CEOs are in their 60s or 70s. So you reach your most productive level in your 60s or 70s. But what happens shortly after that? You retire. Right? You retire. That's not dying. No. This is dying. Right? When consumption goes to 0, that's dying. There's 0 down here. 0 is all the way down here, folks. Okay. Yeah. The idea here is that over the first time period that you're earning money, during this time period, you're paying off the debt that you incurred previously. Right? You're paying off your debt. So you're paying back your student loans. Right? And also you continue to go into debt somewhat even after you graduate. The consumption level might be even higher even after you graduate because you're going into debt to buy a house, to buy a car, right? To buy a diamond ring. Don't do that. Pay cash for the ring. Okay. And then after that, you're saving up so that when you do retire, you can disc save. So here you're saving, so that later on, when you retire, you can just save. In other words, you have enough to live on. Now, a couple of things have happened over time. One is that we've lived longer. People started living longer. And with living longer, a lot of people did not save up enough to last through all their retirement. Not everybody, but a significant number of people. So we have social welfare programs to help take care of those people. On the other hand, it's still true that old people, especially newly retired people, right, are the people who have the most money in any economy. If you want to market a new product, a good product is something that old people want. So as the death point moves farther and farther to the right, we've also observed people staying in the workforce longer, including situations like where Social Security, is extending the age at which you can start to apply for Social Security, and making it later and later and later. I mean, originally Social Security was set at age 65 because that's when the government expected most of us to die. They didn't want to pay out from Social Security, right? They wanted to use that money for taxes for all kinds of other things. And they are doing that. It used to be that it was supposed to be funded, but Social Security is no longer funded. There's no bank account somewhere that has all of that money saved up in. The government uses that to pay for whatever it wants to buy. Okay. In particular, paying other people Social Security right now. Well, here's the puzzle, okay? Suppose that you have this basic framework, and I'm going to simplify it real quickly here on a separate sheet of paper. Make some important points. Suppose that we're looking at a situation basically like this. Here's your consumption over your lifetime, and here's your income over your lifetime. Okay. Very, very basic framework. Again, this axis should be time, and this is money, really, both Y and C. Okay. Well, what happens if your income, right, instead of following this path that you anticipated and expected, what happens if you get a windfall right here? A whole bunch of extra money. How should that affect your consumption? So you win the lottery. How will that affect your consumption? According to Keynes, what you will do is you will spend your marginal propensity to consume of that windfall. So suppose the marginal propensity to consume is 0.7. Right? If 70% of that extra earnings you capture in that short time period, you're going to spend it. So your consumption will go up like this. Okay? Is that what most people will do? Not according to this lifetime consumption hypothesis. Instead, what is most likely to happen is that you will level up your lifetime consumption. That you will smooth that windfall over the rest of your life. That it won't bump it up as much as the marginal propensity to consume, but less than that. Okay. And again, this is important for policy because if the government wants to give us all a windfall, will we actually spend it all? No, we won't. Okay, we're going to spend a smaller portion of that. Is there anything else I want to say about that right now? I'm going to stop. Any other questions for me right now? Okay. Thank you. See you next time.